everyone. So in this video, we just wanted to have a bit of a chat together about the voice that we all have in our head that can be really unhelpful. It's that chatterbox voice that really likes to push our buttons and wind us up and freak us out and question everything about ourselves. And that could be the eating disorder voice for you. It could be the inner critic. We often call it the mad woman in the attic. Whatever you want to call it. I think we all have this inner, annoying, unhelpful voice that likes to play on repeat. And yeah, it's just really not very helpful. So we just wanted to chat a little bit about that and what it looks like for us, and then provide some practical steps on what we do when we're caught up in that kind of thought storm, and how that can be helpful for us. So do you want to tell us a bit about your mad woman in the attic?
Oh, thanks. I was just going to ask you to do yours first. Yes, I think I met her again recently, didn't I? She was really nasty, really nasty the other night, just before I went to bed. In fact, I messaged you the next morning and said, I went to bed with a mad woman in the attic last night. And she kind of picked up on one particular thing. And if, you know, I'll share the detail. I'll share a bit. It was about me being on my own, and actually I'd really quite like, you know, to date or have a new partner or something. But she was there in my head saying, you deserve to be on your own. And it was like, the thing is, I can say it now, and like, you know, we can see you with that kind of smirk on your face, B. But it's like she was really real, really real, and scary, actually. And I fell asleep feeling awful and had a really bad night's sleep. Well, no surprise, because she was, as B said, she just knows which buttons to push. And it can be really unsettling. B, what about you? When was your last encounter with a mad woman in the attic?
I can't remember the actual date, but she likes to rear her head fairly often. Sometimes it's just a little peep. She likes to try her luck and then kind of scurries off. But she used to be kind of present all the time. And I think that was like several years ago. I went through a period, probably about, how long did it last? 6 to 9 months, maybe, where I was just anxious, in a constant state of anxiety. And I had this record on repeat in my head about how I just wasn't competent and that I just wasn't good enough. And because I was hearing it so many times in my head, I believed it. And so when I was in situations, particularly around in my previous work, I would just be in a constant state of self-doubt, and it massively impacted my behavior. So I wouldn't put myself forward for things that involved speaking in front of people, for example, because the voice in my head was telling me that I wasn't good enough to do that I wasn't capable, that all of these different things that people would think about me if I did those things. So I massively kind of shrunk my world and my ambitions, really, because it felt like it was keeping me safe, because this voice in my head was telling me, if you do this, you will all these different reasons. You will be humiliated, you will be judged, you will be fired, you will be all these different things. you will, even just the feeling, like you will feel anxious, therefore don't do it, or you will feel afraid, so don't do it, run for the hills, keep yourself small, keep your ambitions within this very small box because that's safe. But the thing is, that's a load of crap. because there are no facts there are no facts involved in what that voice is saying. It may be based on, I don't know, a past experience, but actually it's then blown up into this massive belief system, and that belief system then completely shapes our view of ourselves, but also then our behavior and how we then go out in the world.
And if you think about this in relationship to an eating disorder, whether you're struggling yourself or you're caring for somebody, can you see how this is showing up with that? We might call it the eating disorder voice. And I'm thinking from the perspective of a carer, it's like that, because I know, you know, one of the things that you, B, and I, we talk about is the importance of self-care. So from a carer's perspective, it's like, but I can't rest. How can I rest? I can't rest there. I've got to look after them and I've got to be on guard the whole time. So there is that critic that's going all the time. And if it was, you know, if I hadn't done X, then they wouldn't be in this situation and it's all your fault. And so we're literally alert and running on empty and exhausted. And I think that's the thing, is when we are all shaken up in our thinking anyway, that's when the mad woman or the inner critic or whoever it is goes, I can get in here, because we are exhausted, we're weakened in a way, in our thinking, because they then take advantage.
And they'll often then present a load of solutions to a bit like what I was saying about avoiding doing certain things to try and keep us safe. But then that goes, I mean, we won't kind of go into a lot of detail about this now. I'm sure we've recorded videos on coping strategies before, but that then leads us down the track of coping strategies, because this voice in our head is saying, you don't want to feel like this. You're feeling awful because of all the stuff I'm telling you. But here's a quick fix, which might look like binging or restricting or drinking 3 bottles of wine or 10 bottles of wine, or whatever your kind of go-to coping strategy is, because that then distracts us from that voice, and it kind of temporarily numbs the feelings that are created from that noise in our head. But the thing is, like, I've said this already, it's not fact. And I've certainly found it hugely helpful to identify it as this mad woman, because, and maybe we can do this in another video, kind of an exercise around getting to know that voice, and actually, like, what do they actually want? What are they trying to do? What are their motives? Because when we've done it, when I've done it for myself, she wants to be loved and she wants attention, and I kind of see her as this, almost like this wounded animal that is desperate for attention and crying out and just wants to be kind of wrapped in love and kindness. And so actually seeing it that way, rather than this thing that I need to try and fight off, is transformational, because it changes me from being in this kind of fight or flight response, like ready to knock this thing out, to which is obviously riddled with tension and stress and more anxiety, to this much more relaxed state of understanding almost, and actually feeling compassion towards this kind of imaginary thing in my head.
And that can feel so counterintuitive, right? Because it's like the desire to get rid of something, the desire to get rid of the eating disorder voice and the eating disorder, or to get rid of our feelings of inadequacy, maybe, let's, you know, as a carer. And actually, as you say, you're absolutely right, that what it asks of us is to lean in and put our arm around and say, it's okay, I've got this. That you don't need to be afraid. It's okay. And that can feel really hard, because it's like you're embracing it. And to embrace the thing that you hate, which feels odd, but it absolutely makes sense. And I know that from my experience with the crazy thinking that I've had, is that actually, if instead of I just go off on one and get cross with myself because I should know this stuff, for goodness sake, it's actually just literally putting my arms around myself and going, it's okay, it's okay. And that's,
I think by doing, sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. And I was going to say, and that's just so helpful to do that.
Yeah. And I think that also helps to take away the fear as well, because I sometimes still become very fearful of those thoughts coming around, because I don't like the way they make me feel.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like when we're fearful, we go into this fighting stance, and I don't think that's helpful. And actually, there is nothing to fear, because when we see what this stuff is actually made of, which is little neurons firing, or kind of puffs of imaginary smoke in our heads, that actually they're no more solid than that, and they're no more true than that, and they have no more power than that, until we give them that power, until we start to make them into this big thing, this big monster that we then start to fear. And
it's like that, I can't remember where I read this, but it was like the little boy that was lying in bed and he was crying because there was a monster on the wall. There's a monster on the wall. And his mum came upstairs and saw what the monster was. And it was the street light reflecting on a tree through the window onto his wall, and it was windy, so it was kind of moving like this. And for him, that looked really real, until she closed the curtain, and then it was gone. And it's that we believe in the monster, and actually it's you know, I hate to say it, it's just thought, but it's no more real than, shall I have a cup of coffee, as a thought.
Yeah. And this isn't belittling by any means how real it does feel, and how really horrible it feels. Like we experience that like fairly often, and it's really not very nice. But it's, I think, just starting to change our relationship with those beliefs and those thoughts and those insecurities, that I think can be really transformational.
So how do we go about this then, Bea? How do we?
I'm so glad you asked. So for us, we just jotted down a few things that we find really helpful when we're caught up in that state. And the first thing is just to notice what is going on, which can actually, it sounds really straightforward and simple, but actually when you're caught up in the middle of it, because often we're like kind of in it, kind of tangled up in it, when we're suddenly like, oh my God, what is going on? So just noticing in that moment that it's that mad woman, or it's that eating disorder voice, or that inner critic that's going off on one. And just,
and
yeah, go on.
I think it comes from a feeling as well that we'll get. We might feel something in our stomach, an unpleasant feeling. Wherever you feel your tension, that's where you'll feel it. Or you may notice that your shoulders are up here, or you'll just get, you know, a pain in your back, or whatever it is, or sickness feeling. And it's like questioning, that's what it is. And to get curious about that.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is actually just to take a moment to breathe, just to allow yourself almost to stop, just to go, that's what it is. And the power of the breath is so important, because it does give us that little pause before we have to do anything else, is just to pause. It's the settling.
I think that can really help us to prevent us from going into our autopilot response, which might be to reach for the bottle of wine, or kind of automatically binge or restrict, or whatever it might be. So just pausing, it almost kind of creates that circuit breaker and allows us to just get a bit of distance from what's going on. Which leads on to the third point, which is actually starting to observe those thoughts that you have. And this, if those of you who have done mindfulness will may have heard this before, but kind of dropping it. If you imagine, like, when you're in this state, it's like having your head in a fog, or head in the middle of a massive cloud. You can't see the wood for the trees. So actually, once you've paused, just allowing yourself to actually drop out of that cloud and then look back up at it. So getting a little bit of distance from what's going on and being a bit curious about it. Because certainly for me, I will get that really horrible sensation in my body first. I will notice the feelings first before I can actually identify what's going on in my head. What is it that I'm believing right now that is making me feel so yucky? So actually getting some distance from it. And I think the pausing before that just really helps.
Yeah.
And being a bit inquisitive, being a bit curious, rather than kind of saying to yourself, what the hell's going on? And demanding that this voice in our head stops. Just being a bit curious.
It's a bit like it's a bit like changing on a torch or a flashlight. The difference between having a directed beam to one that's more broad, so that you can actually, as B said, just get a bit of perspective. So you can see how much, you know, if you think of that, a tiny searchlight kind of thing, as opposed to how much more of a room would be lit up when you've got a broader light coming from it, and you'll get to see a bit more of what's going on. And then the final thing is a great big dollop of kindness.
You missed one.
Oh, what did I miss?
The next one. I'm such pros at this. The next one is, once you've been able to look and kind of see what's actually going on, it's actually remembering that thoughts aren't facts.
Yeah.
So everything that we've said in the earlier part of this video, remembering that this is the mad woman in the attic. Yeah. This is the eating disorder voice. This is not you. This is not true.
Yeah.
And actually remembering that you can choose whether or not to believe what's going on, what's being told to you. And that can that often doesn't feel true, that we have a say. And this isn't about forcing the thoughts out, or kind of trying to scare them away. It's just seeing them for what they are, and actually allowing them to be there, but just knowing that they're not true, that they're not fact, that you don't have to give them that power by buying into it and asking questions about it, and kind of diving head first into this unhelpful story. Over to you for the last one.
So can I say it again now then?
Yeah.
So the final one is a great big dollop of kindness, because self-love is so important here. Because think about it, well, certainly from my experience on Sunday night, I woke feeling bruised on Monday. And the kindness that we need to show ourselves really is what gets us through, is what helps us see that we're just doing the best we can, and that we've been kind of innocently on this self-destruct, listening to this crazy voice that looks real, as we've said, but actually just a bit of tenderness and kindness towards ourselves is kind of what finish those steps off, really.
Remembering that you're human.
Yeah.
And remembering also that everyone has this. Maybe
Yep.
unless you're some monk sitting on a hill somewhere.
Oh, I reckon they get it as well. They're probably not enlightened enough.
But it can feel so isolating. And actually in those moments, I find it really hard to actually reach out to people and voice what is actually going on in my head, because it's so terrifying. But actually even doing that, if you feel that there's someone you can share that with, that in itself can be really helpful, because by saying it out loud or writing it down, it's like it just, or certainly for me anyway, it just really helps to, I don't know, blow up this illusion that it's real. And also when they respond by saying, what?
We do that for each other, and it's almost like,
Yeah.
even in the sending of that WhatsApp, like, how are you today? Oh, a bit of a mad woman kind of scenario going on. You kind of know, it almost blows it up at that point, because it's like, oh, it's not real.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope you found this helpful. That was slick as always.
And a lot longer than we anticipated.
Yep. Yes, hope you found this helpful. Let us know in the comments below. We send out a new video every Monday here on our YouTube channel, or we send it out via our mailing list, our Monday morning food for thought, which goes out to everyone who's subscribed to our mailing list. If you haven't done that already, there's a link below where you can do that. And yeah, we will see you in the next video.